Good morning, everyone. As the screen says, my name is Tom Perry. I'm from Sydney in Australia, and I look after communications for the Pacific region for the World Bank.
And I'm Sarah. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Folktale, and I'm joining you from Brisbane, Australia today.
Today, we're really going to be talking about the power of story, and I don't think anyone here, particularly if you work in development, you're certainly very well aware of the power of stories in influencing and how they can change people's opinions about the work that we do. But I'm just going to give you a bit of evidence, and the evidence is very clear that stories matter to development because they generate empathy. They can change people's opinions and they can make people care. They can drive better policy. They can make better policy driven by communities. And of course, certainly in particular for NGOs, they can help drive fundraising. Absolutely critical, and making people act and making people commit. Now, I'd just like to take a quick moment, and I know probably most of us don't want to, but just to travel back to the year 2020 for a second. And there was unquestionably two major global events that shifted the way every one of us lives and the way all of us operate and the way we work. And of course, I'm talking about COVID and the fact that we're all still wearing masks tells us that it's still a major impact for us. And also the Black Lives Matter and anti-racism conversations that were happening around the globe. And for the development sector, they were very much part of the conversation too. There's no doubt that it affected us all in different ways, but there were a few conversations that were already happening within the development sector that really were brought to the fore by COVID and by the Black Lives Matter and anti-racism conversations. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have seen any of these pieces or seen any of these conversations before, but I imagine that they would resonate with some of you. The question over decolonisation and the question over humanitarian aid being contactless, all of these questions we were all talking about them during COVID, and often at a period of immense stress for everyone. And the work that Sarah and I do, which is in storytelling and gathering content for development organisations, was also affected too. And what I've got on screen here is some images from work that Sarah and I have done in the past, which is very much in I guess you could call it the old model of development storytelling, the pre-COVID model of storytelling, which, and to be clear, this is work that both of us are very proud of, that we've sat at events like this and talked about in the past, and yet it's of a different era now. What you don't see in these images is probably something that is a little bit more unspoken in development storytelling and development content making, which is the idea of the fly-in crew that goes in and tells a story. And as a general comment, they probably have a preconceived narrative. They've already got a narrative that has been designed with a pretty clear objective in trying to whether it's fundraise or to shift policy on a certain issue. And often it's a team of foreigners that's going in and collecting that content. And to be clear, I'm certainly not saying there's not a place for that work still. And I certainly believe that done very well, it can be incredibly effective. But it's no doubt that COVID certainly changed this, and in ways that both of us agree are for the better for this sector. And one of the things that has really driven that is because of the question over authenticity. So suddenly this question over authenticity and big slick productions of anything that we do are far less important. Far more important is the voices that we're hearing, that they're authentic. And I've got a couple of examples here, very simple examples, but if our favourite TV shows, this was a great example of Survivor being broadcast from the host garage, and a politician from our part of the world, Jacinda Ardern, every night Facebook living with her citizens during the pandemic, and she's in this photo being interrupted by her toddler, and I guess the key point there that people have really related to is the authenticity and the fact that what's being said is from the heart. It's far more personal, far more from the heart, far less slick. And the key question that we're really now grappling with is who owns those stories in development? Who has the right to tell those stories? What's really interesting is there's actually some research already being done in this space over authenticity. Some really fascinating research from the UK, produced by Amref Health Africa, has actually seen twin fundraising packs produced and tested in the market. So one pack produced by the fundraising and marketing team for the charity, and another pack produced by Patrick, a project participant in Kenya. And what's really fascinating is that Patrick's pack did considerably better with the donors in the UK. So Patrick's pack, you can see on the front there, generated £76 per donation compared to £55 for the pack produced by the fundraising team. And so the evidence is now starting to emerge that this approach isn't just the right thing to do, it's actually more beneficial for organisations like ours. And so the question that Sarah and I have really been grappling with over the last couple of years is, how do you create that culture of storytelling within projects and within your organisation that's from the grassroots of a project? And so from that point of view, I'd like to take you for a moment to a place called Kiribati, which is in the very far northeast of the Pacific Islands. It's a country that I work on and with, and this is Maria, who's going to share her story with us.
Howdy, I'm Mary Henry. I'm 25 years old and I'm from the beautiful island of Devex. I am currently working as a fisheries officer at the Coastal Fisheries Division, and one of my major jobs is to enforce fisheries laws. So basically I do a lot of inspection at sea and on land as well. This morning me and my team will be conducting sea patrol. We'll be inspecting fishing boats to check if fishermen are not practicing any illegal fishing, such as taking undersized fish or using any fishing methods and gears that are prohibited or banned. So before we carry out our inspection, we need to conduct a small briefing with the team. We'll be allocating our task and make sure that all equipment and materials are in hand. And from there, we're ready to go.
Now, for context, Maria's country was closed. Its borders were closed for 2.5 years during COVID. They only opened about a month and a half ago. So there was no possible way for anyone to get into Kiribati. And Maria was one of 5 people that we asked to share their stories with us as part of that project. I'm also going to talk a little bit with Sarah about a project that we worked on in Mongolia, which was during COVID-19, at the height of COVID. So the World Bank funded a big portion of the frontline COVID response in Mongolia, and I was asked to tell some stories from the front line of that project. Sarah?
Thanks, Tom. In terms of the Mongolia project, the reasons why we worked together on this project was that they were able to evidence or understand the impact of the project and hear from community voices. And so we're hearing from these health workers here in Mongolia, and most of them, if not all of them, have never contributed their voice before, nor have they ever been invited to share their story. And that's really powerful, because when you think about the aspect of storytelling, it's not that we don't have enough stories to share, it's that they don't know how to share a compelling and engaging story with the right audience. So I'm going to take us away from the demand side of storytelling and move to the supply side. There are heaps of stories in the supply side, but what we're seeing is a disconnect in the ability to build a process around storytelling, a process that considers the guidance supporting what we call our contributors, the storytellers, and supporting them through how to tell a story. How do I actually understand where it's going? Why am I being asked? And what purpose does it serve for myself as well as the programs in which I'm part of? And so, oh, you've got the slide deck. Thank you. And so this is why we built Folktale. And Folktale is a technology platform that has the ability to scale storytelling. It empowers organizations to hear from their communities in a really simple way. It connects both the supply side and the demand side in a super simple, hands-off approach that honors the contributors. By doing something like this, we're able to hear more inclusive, community-led stories that's wonderful for folks like Tom in communications, but also a wonderful opportunity to lean into the other aspects of development. What that looks like in terms of, next slide, thank you. The part that I want to lean into further is that we're talking about the sharing of stories, and there's ample stories out there in communications. But I want to lean further into connecting communications with monitoring and evaluation and programs. With the M&E, or monitoring and evaluation programs, their goal is to evidence the actual impact as shared by the programs. And right now, it's often told through quantitative insights or quantitative data collection. Let's put ourselves into the hands of the donors, for example. Ever so often, you receive an impact report, and you're trying to understand the impact of your funds that's connected to the programs and the participants. You're yearning to understand and wanting to deeply connect with the contributors. You hear the quantitative stats. 70% of the program has participated in X number of exercises. But imagine if you can actually hear directly from the contributors, the stories, hear, live, experience, have that human connection as told by the people and the participants within the programs. I think that's really powerful. And in terms of monitoring and evaluation even further, using storytelling as an opportunity in development to be able to lean into methodologies of monitoring and evaluation and using story as a very powerful qualitative data collection tool. And so with Folktale, stories are great, but building the structure and the process around story that can be used for all the different methods here is really a powerful thing to consider. And so another consideration that Tom and I were looking at is if you are looking at building a storytelling culture and leaning into this approach, we wanted to share with you 3 very simple readiness or insights to consider in order for you to be prepared for capturing stories from your communities. In the first instance is thinking about the infrastructure around where the story presents itself. Tom?
Slide, thanks. Beautiful, thanks, Sarah. So here's an example of a project that Sarah and I worked on in Papua New Guinea, in the highlands of Papua New Guinea with cocoa farmers. Some of the really basic lessons around infrastructure that we've taken from this is, do your participants have mobile access? Obviously, mobile phones are incredibly prevalent, but do they actually have access to connections regularly? For example, we made some incredible assumptions that were turned out to be false. For example, once people did have connection, their phones started to go into update mode, and all of the data that we had organised for them completely vanished within seconds. Do they have an email address to sign up to be registered as part of the program? Probably not. So dealing with those caveats, that's all part of the infrastructure question.
Thank you. And the next one is about how do we actually, as part of the storytelling process, continue upskilling and sustaining that learning. And so in terms of storytelling, one of the things that we discovered is you can't teach people or support them, empower them to share their stories if they've never used digital tools before. And so we needed to teach them digital literacy in order to start that storytelling process through a platform like Folktale. There's also 2 components of both the hard skills and the soft skills. So in order to create an engaging story, you have to think about composition, lighting, audio, a lot of the quality that really often is difficult for everyday folks to be able to communicate. And so as part of that process, we really thought about how can we actually simply share with them little tips and tricks that extend beyond the projects. For example, a lot of contributors are coming back with a lot of shaky video footage. And so if you had to leave with one thing today, you can think about how you might be able to stabilize your footage by simply, what we call chicken wings, putting those arms in and creating a human tripod. And as you're moving around in different communities, you're all of a sudden using and utilizing all of the skills and tools that you have readily available to you.
Also known as the T-Rex.
The T-Rex as well, absolutely. And this is great because now you're able to actually share with them all the different components of the hard skills. In terms of learning, storytelling is more than just the hard skills of composition and audio and lighting. Also sharing with folks the considerations around power dynamics and the cultural nuances when you're about to embark on sharing your own story or sharing the stories of others. We look at often from a Folktale platform perspective, privacy, consent, safeguarding, and ensuring that the contributors are honored and they're front and center. Last point being honoring the contributors. Now, we have to ensure that authenticity at its core is the most powerful thing, and this cannot be an extractive process. And often, too often, we find that we can hear their story, take it, and then use it for our needs.
A really good example is Maria, who you met before from Kiribati. For example, in many Pacific cultures, it's often the senior male that's the one designated with sharing the stories, and we definitely factored that into the conversation. And Maria, for example, was the one that stood out to us with the most energy. She was incredibly excited to share her story with us, enthusiastic about being part of the project, and you see that in the quality of the content.
Absolutely. And then finally for us, it's about building a positive experience and that culture of storytelling where multiple folks and stakeholders are involved, myself and Tom, across programs, monitoring and evaluation, and the supply and demand side of storytelling. Ultimately, the conversation needs to lead with authenticity at its core and building at its core community-led stories that can and will create human connections that are deeper in empathy, that will provide impactful and inclusive policies that drive confidence in increased funding. Because authenticity, at the end of the day, is not just the right thing to do. We have seen firsthand the evidence and the impact that it can be done for the development. Thank you.
Thanks very much.